how we are doing business differently. I can tell you from personal experience, their topics are dialed in 100% to what our nation needs right now. What they've been able to do in the in-depth analysis of what they've done is able to help us as a nation really manage complexity of contracting under wartime pressure. There is no doubt that we are a nation undergoing immense transformation. The world is constantly evolving and changing, and our warfighters need the greatest capabilities at any given moment. We cannot be tied to historical models or actions that are really bespoke by a process orientated. We need an outcome orientated process and deliver results. And the research you're going to be walked through today delivers that. And I'm very impressed with the level of rigor and analysis that they've done. I don't want to spoil it. I'll let them walk you through their excellent capabilities, but we certainly will leave some time for questions and be able to do a little bit more in-depth analysis into those papers. As we look at the two topics that'll be presented today, wargaming, right? How do we get at de-risking our ability to be able to deliver capability for our warfighter? How do we train up our professionals to be able to move the ball forward and really be able to access the right tools and know when to do things and how to do things in a very accelerated manner? They do not teach government contracting in the universities at a level of rigor or necessary so that someone can hit the ground running. So how do we shorten that learning curve? And Lieutenant Colonel Jamie Portia, with assistance from Captain Mike Alexander, did a really exploratory framework to really be able to understand how to use scenario-based wargaming tools to really set the battlefield, not just in a warfighting spectrum, but in acquisition. And then as we get to what does that lead to, right? If we do business differently, are we attracting new companies into the assessment? And Amanda has done a phenomenal job of taking a look at both historical norms and where we've gone as a department and where we need to go in order to be able to do a data-driven assessment of both how we've been able to attract new entrants or haven't, and what we can do to be able to go forward and be able to attract the right companies to be able to supply our nation with the services and goods and weapon systems that it requires. And so I'm very excited to be a part of this panel. I think you are going to be pretty impressed and amazed at how they've developed and done the research and intellectual rigor into some really, really, truly relevant topics. And so as we gear up for this, I'd ask you to really take a listen. If you've got questions, please submit them, and then we will do our best at the end to make sure that we moderate this out and go forward from there. And so as we gear up, I will turn it over to the team to walk you through their hard work and their presentation. And we will first start with Captain Michael Alexander as we go over to you.
Thank you, sir. Slide, please. So as mentioned, my name is Captain Michael Alexander, and today I will be presenting exploring the use case of wargaming across the across the contracting life cycle. A study authored by Lieutenant Colonel Jamie Portia, myself, that examines how wargaming can support contracting professionals across the acquisition life cycle. Slide. I will outline our research questions, describe the issue motivating the study, explain our approach, summarize the results, including types of war games and the example objectives across the pre-award stage, present recommendations and a notional example war game, and conclude with implementations for training and future research. Slide. So our research question 1 was, how can wargaming tools be integrated into contracting lifecycle processes? And then our question 2 was, how can wargames be utilized as a training and preparedness tool for contracting professionals? All right, these questions were guided by a literature-informed and conceptual approach that draws from the Department of Defense contracting competency model and recent wargaming literature. Slide, please. So the problem is that contracting professionals must balance competing demands, speed of award, fair and reasonable price, mission need, risk mitigation, and legal and regulatory compliance that are always constantly shifting. The DoD contracting competency model prescribes not just technical skills, but professional competencies like creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, risk management, and strategic thinking. Current training, as most of us know, are often lecture heavy and slide heavy as well, and may not develop those higher order competencies effectively. This study asks whether wargaming as an active, fail-safe method can close that gap by allowing practitioners to practice judgment, take risk, and learn from consequences in a realistic but low stakes environment. Slide, please. Our approach was a literature review of contracting lifecycle concepts, the DoD contracting competency model, and wargame literature. We adopted the 5-phase wargame development process described by Applegate and Burks. It's initiate, design, develop, conduct, and analyze, and mapped educational and analytical wargame tasks onto the contracting lifecycle activities. We derived example wargame objectives to show practical alignment with the DoD competencies. Slide. For our wargame, we only went into the educational and experimental. We did not really go into the analytical. The educational wargame conveys knowledge and leaves participants with improved understanding. Experimental games immerse learners to prepare them for specific job tasks and can be tied to training standards. Analytical games extract information from play to inform decisions, policy, or consider contingency planning. Each type requires different design emphasis and data collection approaches. For example, educational games prioritizes learning objectives and pre and post assessments, while analytical games prioritizes rigorous data capture and defined approaches. Slide, please. For our example, we focus primarily on the pre-award objectives. An educational pre-award objective is to apply business acumen to evaluate market trends, geopolitical issues, and defense objectives to battle test an acquisition plan. In our example, we did exactly this. We went after the acquisition plan. An analytical pre-award objective could be determined to which theater support contract approach is most effective for a new area of operations. These objectives align to target audience such as junior to mid-level contractor professionals for educational games and senior leaders for analytical games, helping to scale design and complexity. Our example, we were all 2 to about 15 years of contracting experience. We had CGOs and then 2 master sergeants. Slide, please. From the framework, we recommend applying the 5-phase process tailored to educational and analytical aims. To initiate, define learning objectives for educational games or decision objectives for analytical games. Form a team and develop a data collection and management plan tied to those objectives. So on this slide and the next slide, it walks through the 5 steps that we took to develop a wargame. Can we go back to the previous slide? Thank you. In design, create scenarios and vignettes informed by market and geopolitical research. Select adjudication methods and plan pre and post assessment for educational games or rigorous data capture methods for analytical games. Slide. In develop, play test the game, conduct blind tests, and run full dress rehearsals. And conduct, administer pre-award assessments for educational games, collect structured data, and manage players and facilitators. Exercise contingencies and debrief participants. And analyze, run post-war game assessments, compare pre and post results for educational games, and synthesize outputs into decision products for analytical games. Slide. So before I get to the thank you part, I do want to talk about the game we did play. So we had about 10 to 12 CGOs and some senior enlisted members, and we gave them a acquisition strategy that was in draft form, wasn't fully complete, and then we kind of just threw scenarios at them, talking about maybe it was a war in the Middle East. How does that affect your supply chain? Does that need to be talking your acquisition plan? We talked about maybe there was a mass layoff with your contractor, and now they are unable to get you products that you need in time. Should there be a contingency in your acquisition plan for that? We built this game knowing and being informed by a few people who are very well adverse in wargaming, is that your first time doing it doesn't go well, right? It's trial by fire. You make mistakes and you learn from it, and you continue to get better with each and every war game. So it was a great time to really dive and look at how can we train to make sure all our people are knowing this reform acquisition world that we live in now. In conclusion, integrating wargaming into the contracting enterprise can stimulate critical thinking, risk-informed decision-making across the contracting lifecycle. Carefully designed educational wargames can develop competencies described by the DoD contracting competency model, while analytical games can inform policy and contingency planning. Wargaming offers a fail-safe environment to practice judgment, learn from consequences, and strengthen acquisition outcomes. Thank you for your attention, and I will be taking questions after the two other presentations. Sir, back to you.
Captain Alexander, just simply an outstanding job. Full credit to you and Lieutenant Colonel Porsche for really doing some amazing analysis on how we can move our training and the learning curve for our technical professionals forward. So I look forward to the questions. I will now turn it over to Miss Amanda Bresler, who has done extensive research in new entrants into the marketplace. Amanda, over to you.
Great, and good morning. Thank you to the Naval Postgraduate School and the Acquisition Research Program for having me. Again, my name is Amanda Bresler, and I'm the president of PW Communications. This year, my team and I opted to revisit a topic we initially explored in 2020. To what extent is the military attracting innovative new companies into the industrial base? Next slide. DIB policy has always required a balancing act. On one side, there's a legitimate need for strategic consolidation. On the other, there's an equally critical need to retain existing vendors and continuously bring new ones into the fold, especially in sectors where commercial innovation outpaces the traditional defense industrial base. So our fundamental research question went beyond simply calculating the share of new entrants every year. We organized our analysis around 4 sub-questions, focusing on data from fiscal year 2015 through fiscal year 2024. First, what types of firms entered and exited the DIB during this time? Second, how did new entrants break into the defense market? Did they leverage defense-sponsored innovation programs? Third, what is the survival rate of new firms in the defense market? And fourth, what drives attrition? Next slide. Using data from FPDS and SAM.gov, we determined that there were 142,890 unique vendors to the Defense Department during our analysis period. Now here's the headline finding that sets the stage for everything else. The defense industrial base contracted by nearly 30% over the last decade. At the same time, defense spending grew 68%, from $275 billion to $462 billion. What that means is a subset of entrenched defense contractors has been capturing an ever larger share of a growing budget. The table on this slide breaks down each fiscal year by existing vendors, new vendors, and vendors that departed. What you see is a consistent, relentless decline. Every single year, more vendors left than arrived. In fact, over the 10-year period, for every new company that came in, approximately 2 left. Now, we do want to acknowledge a limitation in our methodology. Large corporations sometimes register multiple unique entity identifiers or UEIs, each of which our system treats as a separate vendor. That means our absolute vendor count is somewhat inflated. Importantly, this limitation doesn't undermine our findings. It actually makes the trends more alarming. If we're overcounting, the real rate of decline is even steeper. The practical implication is straightforward. The winners have been getting bigger while tens of thousands of companies are getting squeezed out. Next slide. There's a difference between losing hundreds of pencil manufacturers as compared to, say, hundreds of suppliers of critical components. So to understand the implications of this attrition, we need to understand the types of companies that left. To do so, we isolated the firms that exited and assessed them across a range of different features. For instance, tenure. Analyzing exiting firms' first and last contract actions, we found that the majority were entrenched. They had operated in the defense market for more than a year before ultimately departing. When we looked at what those departing companies sold, we categorized them by NAICS code and product service code. The largest share by NAICS, about 6% of all companies that exited, were classified as R&D firms. That's a category we should all be paying close attention to. On the PSC side, the most common category was hotel lodging. And look, losing a hotel vendor is not a national security issue. But just below that, professional services, medical and surgical equipment, ADP software, hardware, engineering and technical services. The more than 2,000 medical and surgical equipment suppliers who departed received nearly $3 billion in defense funding before they left. The 1,700 engineering and technical services firms who departed accounted for over $3.4 billion. Those are consequential losses. And here's the critical gap in the data. We don't know why they left. Was it compliance burdens, budget uncertainty, forced consolidation due to contract bundling, the relative ease of working with commercial customers instead? We can see the pattern clearly, but understanding the cause requires qualitative research. So one of our most critical suggestions for the department is to invest heavily in supplier engagement. That way, these driving forces can be identified and mitigated quickly. Next slide. Now let's turn to new entrants. For the last 2 decades, and especially since 2014, the Department of War has invested billions into innovation programs, OTAs, accelerators, all of which have the stated objective of making it easier for innovative commercial companies to break into the defense market. The theory is that by simplifying procurement pathways, they will attract new and innovative vendors. Here's what the data shows. First, the count of new vendors entering the DIB each year has not grown. It's actually declined. There were about 7,800 new vendors in fiscal year 2015 and only about 5,000 in more recent years. And new vendors' share of total defense spending has remained economically marginal, hovering between 1% and 3% across the entire decade. Second, we developed an innovation scoring methodology using objective signals from the data. Cybersitter contract actions, OTA awards, R&D product service codes, commercial product flags, small business designations, IT and software product service codes, and more. We scored each new vendor using this methodology, whereby vendors scoring 7 or above had strong innovation signals, and those scoring 0 to 2 were classified as traditional vendors. What we found was that 83% of new entrants were traditional vendors, not innovative ones. So among the few new entrants that do manage to break into the defense market, the vast majority have nothing to do with commercial innovation. Relatedly, fewer than 10% of new entrants break into the defense market through the CIBR program, and OTAs, which would include DIU, account for less than 2% of first-time contracts. In spite of their stated purpose, these programs overwhelmingly benefit entrenched contractors. Lastly, we looked at the tenure of new entrants. We found that more than 43% leave the defense market within 1 year of breaking in. Only 36% of all first-time vendors during our analysis period were active defense contractors as of fiscal year 2024. In other words, most companies who enter the defense market do not become meaningful, sustained contributors to the industrial base. This is the valley of death, not as a concept, but as an empirical reality we can now quantify. Taken together, these findings are, in the words of our paper, a damning indictment of more than a decade of policy explicitly aimed at attracting innovative commercial firms to the defense market. Next slide. So, where does that leave us? The DIB is in crisis. Large firms are the beneficiaries of consolidation because they can withstand the conditions that squeeze the smaller firms out. This leaves the military increasingly dependent on a narrow pool of contractors with few alternatives when a critical supplier faces production issues or raises national security concerns. Despite billions in funding for DIB expansion, the department has achieved no meaningful net growth in new entrants. The majority of new vendors do not look like the innovative commercial companies these programs were designed to attract. And transition support has failed. Nearly half of all new entrants are gone within a year. So what do we recommend? First, treat DIB health as a matter of national security. The Office of the Secretary of War needs to maintain a real-time common operating picture of the industrial base, continuously monitoring new entrants, attrition, market consolidation by sector and geography, and more. The tools exist to do this. Large language models and generative AI make this kind of analysis more accessible than ever before. Our research process itself demonstrates the feasibility. What's missing is the institutional commitment to do it. Second, bureaucratic fluency is not a warfighting advantage. The DoW must stop expecting companies to adapt to its procurement culture and start adapting procurement culture to the companies it needs. That means requiring agencies to meet sector-specific goals for contracting with new and existing suppliers and engaging with suppliers directly to identify and eliminate the specific barriers driving them out. The trends we've documented are reversible, but reversal requires new incentives, a deliberate reallocation of resources, and leadership willing to resist the influence of the large defense contractors, who not only benefit from the status quo, but via lobbying power, set it. Next slide. So with that, I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Greatly appreciate the insights and certainly the evidence that supports some pretty interesting claims. So I'm very excited to further dive into the questions. We're also joined by Mr. Jay Barlow. Jay has been kind enough to join us, and he's got a very interesting topic that he would like to present to us as part of his panel and paper. Jay has been doing some excellent research in the space of firm fixed price and cost reimbursable contracts. And so, Mr. Barlow, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself and walk us through your research, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me? Real quick, mic check.
We got you there.
All right, sir. Thank you.
No.
I'm sorry, sir. Am I going to run the slides or are you going to run it? Who's?
The team will run the slides. They'll bring those up shortly. If you could just quick introduction, they will bring those up.
Thank you, sir. Sorry about that. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jay Barlow. I started doing contract conversions here a couple of years ago under duress. And I thought to myself, like, this is a real good opportunity to kind of bring all these activities to bear, do a good historical analysis, and maybe create something that other government or federated entities can use if they're in a situation or if they have a need to actually do a conversion. Next slide. All right, I've broken it down to two main factors: readiness gate and conversion pathways. Again, the readiness gates, these aren't end all be all. These are more or less my interpretation based on my experience, based on the federal services that I've worked for. I would caution that you tailor this if you're interested in doing conversions for your own particular organizations, that you tailor it to your specific needs. Very quickly here, there are 8 gates and 5 conversion pathways. Gate 1, obviously, requirements maturity. If you want to convert from cost plus to firm fixed price, the requirements have to be mature. That is non-negotiable. Second, configuration stability. You have to make sure that if you're doing any type of technology transfers, that whatever you're transferring is in a stable baseline, and you are doing all this type of iterative, agile type work. Interface stability. Again, I'll go through all of these in subsequent slides. I'll just run through this real quick. Technical integration and risk. Process repeatability. The next one is very important. Cost data transparency. Make sure that your cost is consistent month to month for at least a year. Supply chain robustness. If for whatever reasons you have a need for precious metals within your supply chain, understand there's volatility in those particular prices that's going to affect going to a firm fixed price. And last but not least, funding stability. Next, I'm going to talk about conversion pathways. There are 5 conversion pathways. You have to look at them between go and no go. First off, progressive risk transfer. This is probably the most simplistic, where you increase risk to the vendor as time go by and as things become more stable. And then we have cost plus development with firm fixed price, equitable adjustment. We have a hybrid CLIN model, which is my favorite. I've done this a couple times. Then you have direct from CP to firm fixed price conversion. This is when you go through all the gates, the readiness gates, everything is a go. Everything is matching up. Everything is a go. You're good to go to straight from a CP to a firm fixed price. And then lastly, no go, retain CP with exit criteria. Sometimes it doesn't work. There's a misconception that firm fixed price saves money. It doesn't. It doesn't save money. What it gives you is consistency, right? Consistency in budgets, and you're transferring that risk over to the contractor. Next slide, please. All right, again, we talked about readiness gates. I'll run through these requirements. Maturity, fairly self-explanatory. They have to be mature. I've seen some conversions where it was a development contract and the technology was in a TRL 2 or 3, and that was a desire to transition to firm fixed price to save money. Not a good thing. Configuration stability. Formal configuration control in place, engineering change proposals are at a very low rate, and technical baseline is frozen. Interface stability. External interfaces formally controlled, integration costs predictable, technological integration risk. Again, I recommend any type of conversion is done at the high end of the technical readiness levels. I'm talking 8, 9 is where you want to be. Anything lower than that, maybe with some control measures, you can do maybe a 7, but anything below that is just too much risk. Next slide, please. All right, process repeatability. Very simple. Your burn down, your bills, everything is stable month to month with more or less a plus or minus 3% variance over the course of a month. So all those costs are stable. And I didn't add this, but personnel as well, right? You don't want a revolving door for your senior people. You want your senior people to be stable and very consistent. And there's always going to be attrition when it comes down to personnel, but you want to keep that to a minimum. Cost data transparency. This is paramount. You have to make sure that your costs are consistent for at least 12 months. That's paramount. If you don't have consistent costs, and that includes your supply chain as well. If you don't have consistent costs and you don't have a handle on consistent costs, it's not going to work. It's going to be too much of a risky endeavor. So supply chain robustness, that goes without saying. If you're building exquisite instruments or you're building some kind of technological stack, please understand that the costs on those long lead time items or those precious metals are volatile with the market, and you have to bake that into your actual proposal to do a firm fix, which is where the CLINs come in. All right, and then funding stability. Do you have the funding in the budget for the long term? All right, next slide, please. All right, go, no go criteria. simply put, I wanted to categorically put together a list. And again, you tailor this to your specific organization. But I want to put a go, no go, or a conditional goal criteria together for any type of conversion. Very quickly here, down the conditional one, that's gonna make a determine, and that's gonna have a heavy leadership weigh in on whether you can do a condition or not. If you're doing it, I say in a vacuum, you probably should just go no go criteria. Either you make it or not. But if you got a lot of leadership buy-in, a lot of leadership support, then you can kind of tweak things accordingly. Next slide. All right, 5 conversion pathways. Again, pathway 1, progressive risk transfer. Right, you want to transfer risk over to the contractor over time. Next, CP Dev with firm fixed price equitable adjustment. Simply, it's an amalgamation of the first one, but adding, you're going to take a look at what additional costs that may be affected from the volatility in the market or changes in the market, inflation, things like that, and then you're going to make sure that the contractor is not working at a loss. Hybrid claim model. This is by far my favorite. Adding, and again, when I was a contractor professional, I only did this like 1 or 2 times. A lot of the contractor professional I did not want to do this, and did not want to add cost plus cleanse to a firm fixed price contract. But this is almost like the holy grail when it comes down to doing this kind of work. It allows you to hedge your risk in terms of the possibility of things could happen when you have known unknowns. I mean, at the same time, it gives you some flexibility if things go awry. Next, direct CP to a firm fixed price. This is when all the go criteria are lining up accordingly. Everything is slick. You're ready to go. And then again, no go, retain CP if it doesn't work out. Next slide. All right, just to kind of codify everything, you got to make the assessment. Please make the assessment. Again, when I did my first conversion, it was under duress, by direction of the government. Hey, you will do this, and a lot of bumps in the road. Right. Tailor the conversions, tailor the gates according to what the needs of your particular organization is, and it'll work out well. So I think I'm out of time, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jay.
Yes,
I
sir.
really appreciate the insights, and certainly a very timely topic with the executive order that was just launched last week, indicating a strong preference for firm fixed price contracting. So I'm sure we'll get into some of those questions. As we kind of open up, I first want to congratulate each of the panelists here. Again, not only excellent research, but presented in a way that I think all of us will be able to resonate with and go further in depth. I do have a couple questions that are coming in, and so we'll start with the wargaming research. Captain Alexander, I was just wondering, it sounds fantastic, right? But from a practical application, what would the first step to actually implement wargaming in an office environment be?
Great question, sir. So first, Lieutenant Colonel Portia and I, we're trying to build up like a library set of like plug and play scenarios. Because I know it's a big ask, right? Do your normal job and then try to build your own war game, and you haven't done any of the research like Lieutenant Colonel Portia and I have. So we're trying to build up a library where it's plug and play, where oh, I need to talk about small business. I want my team to know about small business. We'll run a war game. And then we're also trying to develop a create your own scenario thing, right? Maybe our library is not built up enough, but we'll have the steps for you to build out a game yourself.
That's fantastic. One of the questions that came in, I think, kind of speaks to that. So where can we find your paper so we can even just understand and be able to walk through and implement the wargaming methodology?
So I'm not sure if there is a library for the ARP papers, but I do have his email, so I will send him a private email with the paper.
Outstanding. Perfect. And then I was wondering, when you're using wargaming, would this be kind of managed at what echelon, right? Would it be the unit level? Is it direct first line type supervisor to the employee? Do you view this as an enterprise approach across an entire department? And is it scalable, right? Can you tailor, or how quickly can you adapt it, both in terms of content, but also to the position, right? A contract specialist versus a contracting officer. You kind of spoke a little bit to maybe using AI. Just, is there any thoughts as it relates to the ability to just kind of scope and scale this?
So I think it'd be implemented at all levels, right? A single PCO might have a very new contracting specialist. So they're just going to put them through kind of like one or two scenarios that they'll see in their daily life. And then go take that squadron command level. Maybe the commander sees patterns in his organization. So for the next training session, he's going to have his entire squadron do scenarios on that pattern that he sees. And it even goes up to further to like agency level, right? You're always looking at what's a new frontier, what's the new conflict in the future. You can definitely build out a whole war game, talking about going to the PACOM region or CENTCOM region and talking about all different types of scenarios. So everyone from your single PCO to contract specialist, all the way up to the 3-star, 4-star can implement these war games.
All right, perfect. And then kind of is the end game with the war game scenario, or just, what is the measure of effectiveness? Is it workload management? Is it just having folks go through it over and over again? Have you thought of any, ways to measure direct output from improvement based upon the war game?
So each individual war game, like for example, our acquisition planning war game, we got feedback from participants. They're like, I never looked at acquisition plan in that way. I never thought about geopolitical issues when I was thinking about this training, acquisition plan, right? It's kind of like you look at it once a year or at the beginning of the acquisition, and then you don't touch it again. So it really forces you to like look at those things.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. We're going to pivot now to Amanda and her research. Obviously, I believe, the findings from that analytics is really highlighting an area of focus and concern for the department. Amanda, really, what is the first step the Department of War and the services should take to begin addressing the issues you identified in the research?
Sure. I think it's important to acknowledge that memos and new announcements of policy directives are not sufficient to change culture and reorient behavior. So I think the first step, as I mentioned in my presentation, is to ensure that the department has a common operating picture and they're all working off of the same picture, and they have clear, measurable goals that they hold stakeholders accountable in meeting. So that goes beyond saying something like, we are shifting to firm fixed price contracts whenever applicable. How will you actually measure the extent to which that's occurring, and ensuring that people, quite honestly, have their jobs are on the line if these goals are not met? It has to be taken seriously in order for the inertia to be reversed, because culture is a real part of all of these challenges.
Okay, well, thank you for that. The companies who left the market, were you able to uncover, did they simply just go out of business? Did they just switch purely to commercial space? Were they brought out by some of the larger firms? Did any of your analysis get into the specifics of how they left the market?
So not in this paper, but in our experience of nearly a decade in analyzing this data in a variety of different formats, the answer is all of the above. And it's all of the above. And we've explored some of the underlying reasons behind that behavior in other research papers as well. So you can look at things like, how is the government marketing its requirements to industry? How does it actually communicate with industry regarding what it's looking for? And we found in a paper we published through Naval Postgraduate School 5 years ago, we ran the description field of over 1 million archived defense solicitations through a readability score, and less than 4% of these descriptions were written in plain English. And that assumes commercial companies can even find these opportunities to begin with, which is nearly impossible. If you've ever been to USA Spending or SAM.gov, you know firsthand it's the site design is archaic. It's almost impossible to figure out where you're supposed to search for open requirements. And actually, that's why there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of commercial software companies that charge companies for access to otherwise publicly available data, because the government makes it so difficult to navigate this data directly. So you have all of these barriers. I could talk for hours about these barriers, but it ultimately results in companies leaving for a whole host of reasons.
No, that's perfect. Certainly the current administration has heavily emphasized revitalizing the DIB and bringing in new entrants. From your perspective, have you seen anything recently in policies publications suggesting that they'll have more success?
It's too soon to tell. The acquisition transformation documentation and this announcement regarding firm fixed price contracts, sure, they're promising signals, but like I said, it's all of its lip service until there are measurable requirements around these talking points. And I know there are people doing great work inside of this administration, as was the case, in prior administrations, that seem to care about these issues. But I think we suffer from policy, people getting excited about policy without thinking through what does implementation look like.
Appreciate that. Great feedback. We're now going to pivot to Jay, and we've got a couple questions incoming to his topic area of converting cost plus to firm fixed price to really kind of support and strengthen mission resilience. Jay, could you just you in your research, were you able to uncover any apprehension for making that switch? Is it just historical norms, or is there something that is a market force at play?
You nailed it, sir. It was historical norms. A contract has been cost plus for 5 years to a decade. That was the signature of that contract, and the discussion wasn't there to convert because oftentimes it's a feeling that conversion, that something is lost, right? That you won't be able to retain your talent, you won't be able to retain good people. The contract is going to be less efficient. You won't be able to hit the mark. So again, that history of that particular contract being cost plus was the biggest sticking point, and those conversations were not being had.
Okay, no, thank you. Have you seen anything in the recent regulatory overhauls, the revolutionary FAR overhaul, the executive order, or anything that gives you belief that things will change?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. There is no shortage of swirl. What I'm not seeing is sweeping changes in the FAR, guidance coming out from the Acquisition Council. I would like to see more of those activities at the higher contracting official level, where those decisions are being submitted within the FAR. They're being submitted within DFARs and our OTA guidance, and not just legislation like what was done with some stuff that was done recently. So I got it, to a point that was made earlier. People are doing the best they can with what they have, but I want to see the lawmakers. I want to see the policymakers in the contracting field push information down to leaders like yourself, so you can go and start implementing stuff at the working level.
No, I appreciate that. I certainly think the recent executive order will result in that, and I agree. Obviously, given the efforts and the energy, and it'll be curious as we gear up, to see the interplay between all three researches, right? So as we move to try and leverage more firm fixed price constructs, right? How do we war game that and train our folks to be able to leverage those tools? And then does that attract new entrants? So it'll be curious to see, a year from now, the impact of all of your research areas and the interplay in between such. We are seeing a lot of questions come in related to, where can I find the papers? Will they be, highlighted somewhere? They are on the Naval Postgraduate School webpage. It's a rather long URL, so I will not be able to fully read it out here, but we will make sure it gets published. And if you have not seen those, I highly encourage you, not just for this panel, but the other topics and presentations that are listed there are definitely must reads. All right, we are going to circle back to Captain Alexander. Some great work and some questions continue to come in, and so as we look at your great efforts there, Mike, have you been able to really see the variations in scenarios? Did they have an outsized effect as you kind of did different scenarios, with the war games, and did that result in different behavior in the acquisition strategies that were developed?
For the one scenario, the war game that we developed, we kind of had 4 or 8 categories of scenarios. And we definitely saw a lot of different variations in them, but they're targeting different topics. One was data rights and IP issues. One was geopolitical issues. One was economical issues. And all of those scenarios were tied into just talking about the acquisition plan. But as you develop like the small business war game, you'll have specifically tailored scenarios for that war game that talks about small business.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. And then Amanda, kind of over to you. As you did your research, a couple of questions have highlighted different survey results from, industrial associations. NDIA did a vital signs in 2024 to this year. GMU did a research on the DIB in 2025. Has this trend been kind of captured by other research that you were able to review and highlight the risk, or is your research topic really kind of laying the foundation for others to take a look at it?
A little bit of both. It's funny because it was a conversation with Jerry McGinn from GMU that pushed me to go with this research topic. My team and I were toying with a few different ideas, and I'm familiar with his work, and one of the conclusions they drew was, okay, this isn't as bad as we think it is, because a lot of the firms that appear to be exiting are in fact choosing not to work with the department for reasons outside the department's control. And what I said to Jerry was, well, shouldn't we take a closer look here? Because there's a difference in losing pencil manufacturers as compared to aerospace components. And he's like, yeah, that's a good point. So we can't just take these top line numbers and make conclusive policy decisions. They're important as a framework to start the conversation, but you cannot make any informed policy decisions around, we lost 10,000 vendors. Well, what were they? Does it matter? So a lot of the existing research either focuses on very top line metrics, or in the case of the NDIA paper, for instance, you're talking about direct interviews with 50 to 100 suppliers, which is very important qualitative feedback. That's where a lot of the knowledge around, okay, what are the compliance burdens doing to the industrial base comes from? How does budget uncertainty affect companies' decision to pursue the defense market? So that work is very important, but as far as I know, we're the first to fuse some of that qualitative framework against a very data-driven foundation.
No, I appreciate that, and certainly, as your research highlights, there really is a national security imperative. Have you been able to, uncover any best practices as ways to incentivize in this space? Either it's an incentive from the government to be able to attract new entrants, or even some of those major defense contractors to pull in new entrants into the marketplace. There's a mentor protege or the like.
So mentor protege, this might raise a few eyebrows. I'm happy to chat with folks offline about this. We don't discuss the mentor protege program in this paper, But in years past, we've looked at various set-aside programs, and I bucket the mentor protege in that category insofar as it affords preferential treatment in the contracting process to a specific subset of firms. And what you find is the major players in any given space, in any given sector, against any different set of criteria, exploit these programs to their benefit. So in the case of the mentor protege program, we have countless examples of the large companies partnering with essentially shell corporations to qualify for the mentor protege sole source contracts that they would have otherwise won if they were just competed freely and openly, because these are the largest contractors. So again, you see the distortion of the market and a failure to even benefit the types of businesses that the program was designed to serve. So it's problematic for many different reasons. What I will say is this, on a more positive note, and this is addressed directly in the paper, we see a spike in new entrants through the SBIR program at the onset of the Air Force's Open Topic Initiative in 2019, 2020. So we've analyzed the SBIR program in a number of papers and across a number of forums over the years. And that spike, I think, speaks to the fact that in that very narrow window of time, the Air Force was committed to doing things differently, and that informed the culture driving actual contracting decisions. I don't believe it was mandated that they needed to award a set share of those phase 1 open topics to new entrants, but there was a very tangible sense among the people who created that program, who I know well, that was a priority, that they wanted to go out and access these companies, and they were rewarded culturally inside the system for doing that. And that trend has reversed in the 5 or 6 years since the program got off the ground. Again, as I used this word earlier, inertia is real, so it becomes subject to the same tides that pull a lot of other well-meaning programs inside of the military astray. But it is evidence that you can make these incremental changes if you have the right combination of incentives and kind of cultural the zeitgeist in the moment. The last point I'll make relates to your question about the major contractors. From the first paper we published through the Naval Postgraduate School in 2018 to this day, one of my major recommendations is the government and the military should be incentivizing the major defense contractors against the same goals that they hold their own internal contracting officers to. So you can look at the framework for all of these set-aside programs as an example. Just like the government is required to set aside 23% of its contracting dollars annually to various disadvantaged groups, so too are the largest defense contractors obligated to flow down a certain share of their prime contract dollars to various disadvantaged firms. And I've always felt, well, instead of incentivizing these major contractors to buy pencils from women, we should be incentivizing them and forcing them to leverage capabilities funded and fielded by, say, the SBIR program, right, to help pull them through and actually hold them accountable in the same way we hold them accountable for their other set-aside goals, but against criteria related to technical merit, innovativeness, various sectors of the supply chain that are vulnerable, using those major defense contractors as mechanisms to pull suppliers into the industrial base and disseminate their capabilities force-wide faster than they would be able to disseminate as prime contractors.
No, it's an interesting take, and I appreciate it. And the cultural relevancy that you bring into this mix in terms of incentivizing both our industry partners as well as our internal government employees to truly understand and leverage the entire industrial base. So thank you for that. Jay, we're going to go over to you. We've gotten a couple questions about the moving from cost plus to firm fixed price. In your mindset, obviously there's a continuum on contract types, where there's incentives and other things. Is it essentially your methodology and your framework applicable to all cost plus to firm fixed price conversions, whether it's just full on reimbursable or if there's an incentiving arrangement?
I'll be remiss to say that I have had the opportunity to test the framework on every variation or iteration. I haven't, but I feel that it's a good basis and it can be tailored and tweaked depending on those situations. And those situations can be, sweeping, dire, different. But yes, I do think it's a very good baseline to build from. And I said that during the brief at the onset. You have to take it, because some of these situations, and I've seen some of them, I've been brought in as a consultant or to talk with the government or hey, this is what we did last time. Some of these situations are very extreme, very extreme, and we're in some very austere environments in terms of funding. And sometimes leadership wants to look to cut costs, and firm fixed price is the way to do that. I don't think conversion is the right way of doing that, but I do got it. I do get it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. As the Department of War, and then certainly Department of Army, is moving towards a portfolio-based approach, and I've seen already great strides in being able to truly understand, and I think it speaks to your methodology, the sharing of readiness levels, the technical maturity, which will help enable the right contracting and acquisition strategy. As we gear up, were you able to uncover any sort of motivation from an industry partner perspective or preference for a cost reimbursable or a firm fixed price construct?
Sir, I tell you, you're itching, you're scratching a itch here. Oftentimes, industry wanted firm fixed price, um, but I felt in my research it was for not always the right reasons, right? Because again, a lot of these, the more risky the effort, the more risky the endeavor, you have to hedge that risk with costs. So again, you can inflate the cost of a contract when you have all this risk baked into a firm fixed price, right? When it's cost plus, you have to bring those costs down. You have to be competitive because you're not, the government doesn't expect for you to perform. They expect for you to partner and give best effort. But with a firm fixed price, you shall perform, you shall complete. And so again, I think, and again, I want to be careful what I say because there are always bad state actors in everything that we do. But I feel if it's a massive onset, a lot of companies, a lot of competitive contracting efforts, they're going to use that to kind of hedge. They're going to have to hedge their risks, right? They're going to have to bake all this risk into the cost of the contract, and then I think it's going to create a massive amount of inefficiency. Over, sir.
Perfect. No, I appreciate you sharing that. So as we kind of gear up, final 15 minutes, we've still got some questions coming in. And so we will address those quickly, and then I will turn it over to each of the panelists, just if there's anything they'd like to conclude with, and then I'll end with my closing comments. So we're getting a lot of thumbs up and congratulations to each of you. So I just wanted to pass that on. And then certainly, I would ask, Jay, have you seen any measures of effectiveness as it looks at, performance versus how much is actually being spent? There's always that push-pull tension when setting up a contract strategy, whether it's firm fixed price or cost reimbursable, to make sure that the warfighter actually gets the capability they need. Did your research get into that at all in terms of the effectiveness of one contract type over the other?
No, sir, not in this particular one. Not in this particular one. But I to be frank, I do have that in my head as maybe a future topic, and it is definitely something that I would love to unpack. Cost versus value, basically, right? They are, because again, that's with all the executive orders and all the swirl within the Department of War. Is the government getting their money's worth, or is it just simply escalating costs? And at the onset, it looks like a bunch of escalating costs, and they're blaming everything on the market. And you have a lot of defaults and companies not performing and delays and capability not being delivered, and when it's delivered, it's not performing in accordance with all that. I think packs into that topic that you said, and something I would love. But I stay focused on the readiness gate and the conversion pathways.
as any good researcher should. Well done, Jay.
Thanks,
All
sir.
right, we're going to go back to Captain Alexander again. You and Lieutenant Colonel Portia, phenomenal job. Great and intriguing concepts to be able to war game actual contracting and acquisition knowledge. Is there anything you'd like to make sure that you leave us with from a thought or perspective from your research?
Thank you, sir. Nothing too much to add, but I'm always welcome. If you have questions later or you want to learn more about our research, just reach out. Lieutenant Colonel Portia and I are both really passionate about this topic and how we can escalate this topic to further acquisition and contract professionals. So I just want to thank everyone for their time and look forward to hearing from everyone in the near future. Back to
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
Michael. Yeah, you and Jamie certainly have your passion shines through in both your paper and your presentation. So well done to you both. Amanda, certainly a very important topic, no more so in today's times. We had obviously, the Last Supper as part of the Department of Defense, where it was a stated intention to contract to what are many calling nowadays the first breakfast, where there is a stated goal to bring in new entrants. Is there anything you would like to leave us with from your research?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to echo my fellow panelist in saying I'm very passionate about these issues and I love to engage with folks in this industry. Please reach out in whatever format you'd like. LinkedIn, my email address is in the paper. And let's figure this out. And I like to come back to the fact that solving the kinds of problems that I've identified in my research is objectively easier than so many of the technological challenges the department has faced and surmounted. We've put a man on the moon, so we can put metrics into place that help us expand the industrial base. And I like to hammer that point home because we can all complain about how difficult the department makes it to work with them. And, but why are we here? Because we believe it's important for our military to have access to the best technologies as quickly as possible. And I want everyone to know that's what motivates me. That's what drives me. And I certainly hope that I can work with some of you in bringing solutions to bear. So thank you very much for including me today.
Thank you, Amanda. And again, that drive and that research toward a very specific goal and aim, I completely agree with you that it is achievable, and marshaling the resources to be able to bring those new entrants to be able to deliver, as you stated, it's not just the numbers, right? Doubling the number of new entrants is mildly interesting if we're not able to deliver additional capability to our warfighter. And so I appreciate that nexus there. Well done. Jay, certainly, as times of fiscal constraint, look at our military and making sure we have predictability in our budget, as well as a demand signal to our industry partners and our warfighter. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with in terms of your research as it relates to cost reimbursable, cost plus fixed fee contracts, converting them to firm fixed price?
Only one thing, sir. I'm like my counterparts here. I'm very excited about the future, about the possibilities. I know there's a lot of swirl, a lot of chaos right now with everything that's being, all the executive orders and all the how exactly things are going to get done, right? But within that, I think these are conversations that we probably should have had a decade ago. With some of the changes that we're making. So if we can kind of push through the pain and look over the horizon, I think there's some greatness just right around the corner. So I'm really excited about the future, sir. Over.
As am I. And, I think there definitely is an energy and desire in this space. And so I'm hopeful and very confident that through some of the great, analytics and research of fine folks as yourself, that we'll be able to move the ball forward in providing the right contracting type in support of our warfighters. And so I would just again like to congratulate each of the panelists. There has been, I'm sure, many a long night, a lot of hard work in order to be able to prepare this research and present it in a way that is readily accessible to so many of us that are on this call, and will forever be able to benefit from your effort and energy in that regard. Preserving our military superiority is a national imperative, and we need research like this in order for us to be able to see ourselves and lead ourselves to where we want to go as a nation. And so I cannot thank you enough our ability to attract new entrants, our ability to manage complex contracts and strategies through innovative ways to learn and train our workforce, to ensuring that we de-risk our contract types and make sure that we've got incentives properly aligned from a financial standpoint with our industry partners. Ultimately, all of those go towards the same aim, which is to really be able to deliver capability to our warfighter. And so it is fine researchers like you that help us with that every day. As someone who is a practitioner of the contracting craft and navigating through a very rapid and fast-paced amount of change, we are very, very much appreciative of what you have shared with us today. So you should be commended. You should be very proud of yourselves and know that you have had an outsized impact on so many of us. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort. And certainly know that I view this as only the beginning as we take that research and work to implement it across our department. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all the attendees. And thank you to the Naval Postgraduate School for hosting such an amazing event and giving us the opportunity to hear from such scholars such as Amanda, Michael, and Jay. So thank you all. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.